Marie Antoinette, the Queen, the scandal, the guillotine. She was born into royalty, married into one of the most powerful dynasties in Europe, and died beneath the blade of the guillotine. Marie Antoinette, a name synonymous with scandal, wealth, and revolution, has been remembered as the queen who said, "Let them eat cake." From her upbringing in Vienna to her final days in Paris, we'll explore the truth, the myths, and the politics that shaped a revolution. But is that all she was? In this video, we'll unravel the life of France's most controversial queen. Born Maria Antonia in 1755, she was the 15th child of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. At just 14, she was married off to Louis August, the Dauphin of France, an awkward, shy boy who would become King Louis XVI. She left Austria, changed her name to Marie Antoinette, and entered Versailles, a golden cage filled with customs she did not understand. Versailles was not simply a palace, it was a living symbol of absolute monarchy, a stage where every glance, gesture, and gown carried political weight. For a 14-year-old girl, fresh from Vienna, it was both dazzling and oppressive. Marie Antoinette struggled immediately with the crushing ritual of the French court. She was expected to follow elaborate etiquette, including being dressed and undressed by noblewomen according to strict rank. Every meal was a public event. Even childbirth was witnessed by an audience. Her new husband, Louis Auguste, was intelligent but socially awkward. Their marriage went unconsummated for 7 years, a fact that became public scandal and subject of gossip pamphlets. The delay wasn't entirely their fault. Historians believe Louis may have suffered from a mild medical condition or simply a lack of confidence. Regardless, Marie took the blame. The young Dauphin was accused of being frigid, then frivolous, then unfaithful, all before she became queen. In 1774, at just 18, Marie Antoinette became Queen of France when Louis XV died. But becoming queen brought neither comfort nor control. As queen, Marie Antoinette had no official role in governance. Her influence was social, not political. But her image became inseparable from the monarchy's failures. She threw masked balls and gambled at cards. She revolutionized fashion, rejecting rigid corsets for flowing muslin dresses, often styled like shepherdess gowns. Nobles followed suit, and critics recoiled. To the public, her simple gowns looked like mockery. How dare a queen pretend to be a peasant, seeking refuge from the formality of court? She escaped to the petty Trianon. She surrounded herself with close friends, mostly women, and built a fantasy world of gardens, plays, and private salons. She even created a miniature hamlet where she and her ladies dressed as milkmaids and played at rural life. It was whimsical, romantic, and entirely tone-deaf to the political climate outside the palace walls. While the poor starved in the streets of Paris, the queen was perceived as playing dress-up with royalty. Her attempts at simplicity came across as insult, and every move she made only further widened the divide between the crown and the people. She had become a queen without influence, a wife blamed for a failing marriage, and a foreigner resented by a nation unraveling. By the mid-1780s, Marie Antoinette was no longer just a queen. She had become a symbol, and not a flattering one. She symbolized everything that people believed was wrong with France. Foreign influence, unchecked privilege, royal excess, and the press took full advantage. What we'd now call tabloid journalism was then a brutal mix of satire, slander, and propaganda. The Queen was depicted in grotesque caricatures, as a serpent, as a harlot, even as the true ruler behind a weak king. Some pamphlets accused her of wild sexual affairs, with men and women alike. Others painted her as a political saboteur, secretly manipulating Louis XVI and steering France toward ruin for Austria's gain. The truth was more mundane. Marie Antoinette had little interest in politics and even less power, but in the eyes of the public, facts no longer mattered. Her personal sanctuary, the Petit Trianon, became an object of outrage. To critics, it wasn't a retreat, it was evidence of her detachment. While the poor couldn't afford bread, the Queen was plain milk made in silk. Her fashion, too, became political. The muslin dresses she wore at her Hamlet were meant to signal simplicity. Instead, they were viewed as scandalous. Too informal, too costly, and dangerously foreign, but nothing did more damage to her reputation than the affair of the diamond necklace. A Parisian con artist, Jean Delamotte, orchestrated a scheme to convince Cardinal de Rohan that Marie Antoinette wanted to purchase a 1.6 million livre diamond necklace in secret, using forged letters and even a prostitute impersonating the Queen. Jean tricked Rohan into arranging the purchase. When the fraud was discovered, it should have been dismissed as a bizarre scam, but instead, the scandal went public, and the Queen, who had no role in the scheme, was blamed. The court cleared her, but the damage was done. To the people, it was just more proof that Marie Antoinette would do anything to satisfy her vanity. The trial that followed was a media circus. The Queen was never called to testify, yet she was the one convicted in the court of public opinion. This was the final blow to her reputation. She became, irreversibly, the face of France's financial ruin, though she had spent far less than generations of Bourbon kings before her. But the anger wasn't just about a necklace or a wardrobe. France was on the verge of collapse. Grain prices were rising, debt was unpayable. The Enlightenment had changed how people thought about kings and queens. Marie Antoinette became a lightning rod for the rage of a nation, not because she deserved it, but because the monarchy needed a villain, and she fit the role perfectly. In the eyes of the public, she wasn't a woman trying to find her place in a rigid, patriarchal monarchy. She was a decadent threat, a queen out of touch, a monarch they could no longer afford. In the years just before the Revolution, the court became more isolated. The streets grew louder. By the late 1780s, the mood in France had shifted from unrest to full-blown rage. The economy had collapsed under the weight of war debt and aristocratic excess. Bread prices skyrocketed. Children were starving in the streets. The monarchy, once seen as sacred, was now seen as parasitic, and no figure drew more fury than Marie Antoinette. The press had long been hostile. Now they were venomous. She was branded Madame Veto Bland for blocking economic reforms. In truth, she had little influence over legislation. But nuance had no place in revolution. In October 1789, a defining moment arrived. Thousands of women armed with kitchen knives, farm tools, and desperation marched 12 miles from Paris to Versailles. By the time they reached the palace, the crowd had swelled. They stormed the gates, murdered guards, and nearly reached Marie Antoinette's bedchamber. She escaped only moments before, fleeing through a secret passage with her children. The next day, the royal family was forced to relocate to the Tuileries Palace in Paris. They were no longer sovereign rulers. They were state prisoners under watch. Their daily lives became a negotiation with fear. Marie Antoinette, once surrounded by luxury, now sewed clothes for her children and read in silence while protesters chanted outside the gates. Still, she refused to surrender entirely. She began writing secret letters, urging monarchs across Europe to intervene. She believed the revolution could still be stopped. In June 1791, the royal family made their escape attempt, orchestrated largely by Marie Antoinette. Disguised as commoners, they boarded a carriage and fled Paris. But they didn't make it. In the small town of Varennes, A postmaster recognized the king's face from currency. The family was arrested and returned to Paris in disgrace. Any remaining sympathy evaporated. They weren't just out of touch. Now, they were traitors. In August 1792, insurgents stormed the Tuileries Palace. The monarchy was formally abolished. Louis XVI was arrested, tried, and found guilty of treason. In January 1793, the King of France was beheaded in the center of Paris. Marie Antoinette was now simply Widow Capet. Stripped of her crown, her status, and her husband, Marie Antoinette was transferred to the Conciergerie, a dark, cold prison where she was watched day and night. Her health declined, her hair turned white, and her children were taken from her. On October 14th, she stood trial before the Revolutionary Tribunal. The charges: treason, depleting the national treasury, incest with her son. The accusations were largely baseless, especially the final one. A charge so cruel it shocked even her enemies. Her only response: "If I have not replied, it is because nature itself refuses to answer such a charge made to a mother." The trial lasted 2 days. The jury deliberated for mere minutes. She was found guilty. At 5 a.m., Marie Antoinette was awakened for her execution. Dressed in a simple white chemise in a common cart, hands bound. Unlike her husband, who rode in a covered carriage, she was fully exposed. The once glorious Queen of France sat upright, dignified, facing the crowd with unshaken composure. As she climbed the scaffold, she stepped on the executioner's foot and offered her final words. "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." Marie Antoinette died at 12:15 p.m. on October 16, 1793. Her body was thrown into an unmarked grave. No ceremony, no crown, no mercy. But her story was far from over. She became a myth, a lesson, a warning, and, in time, a symbol of misunderstood womanhood. Marie Antoinette died in disgrace, mocked, misunderstood, and erased. Her life ended beneath the blade. Her story did not. In the centuries that followed, she became something bigger than herself. A legend, a cautionary tale. The phrase, "let them eat cake," is often the only thing people remember. But she never said it. That quote first appeared in a book by Rousseau, written when she was just 10 years old. Still, it stuck. Why? Because it served a narrative. The cruel queen, eating sweets while her people starved. It was simple, memorable, useful. Throughout the 19th century, Marie Antoinette was painted as a shallow, spendthrift, aristocrat. Historians echoed revolutionary propaganda. There was little interest in the truth. But as time passed, her image began to shift. Diaries, letters, and court documents revealed a more complicated figure, a teenager thrust into political chaos, trying to survive a world built to devour her. In the 20th and 21st centuries, she was reclaimed, first by historians, then by artists, filmmakers, and even fashion designers. To some, she became a symbol of misunderstood femininity. A woman punished not for what she did, but for how she was seen. She wasn't the architect of the French Revolution. She was a scapegoat for a crumbling system. A foreign queen in a failing court, a young mother stripped of her voice, her power, and ultimately, her children. Years after her death, Marie Antoinette's remains were exhumed and reburied at the Basilica of Saint Denis. Her name was restored. Marie Antoinette has been villain, victim, muse, and metaphor, a queen who never ruled, yet still reigns in our collective imagination. In the end, Marie Antoinette was not a monster, nor a martyr, but a mirror. She reflected the fears, desires, and delusions of a world coming undone. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more powerful history told differently. Was Marie Antoinette a victim, a villain, or something in between? Tell us below.